who could have guessed how much Avatar content fans would be receiving in the coming years? There's an announcement of a brand new Nickelodeon studio dedicated solely to the Avatar universe. With that, there's been speculation, teases, and confirmation that we'll be seeing new animated shows and movies very soon. It sounds like we're about to have an Avatar cinematic universe. In the meantime, we over at WickedBinge think it's time to update our own Avatar content with a brand new, extra thorough look at the original series, which is so near and dear to our hearts. Hey guys, I'm Brad with WickedBinge, and this is Avatar: The Last Airbender, Good to Evil. With a series like this, it's kind of a given that not every prominent character will make it onto the list. Still, we've tried to include all who are integral to the plot or who stand out as important. As usual, we'll be starting with the purest character and working our way down. It would be a crime not to give the top spot to Avatar Aang. It's sometimes said that the person who should have power is the one who doesn't want it. Aang begins his journey without much love for his title. Because of the looming threat of war, Aang is told he is the Avatar much earlier than normal, at age 12. As a result, he becomes scared that he will no longer be able to live a normal life, prompting him to run away from his home. A century later, he and his bison are dug out of an iceberg by two water tribe teens, and the first thing on his mind is penguin sledding.
Will you go penguin sledding with me?
Eventually, he learns about the state of the world and the 100-Year War, which leads him to believe that he's a failure. But let's be real, how could we expect a 12-year-old to accept the responsibility of giving up his entire life to save the world? Although, and likely because, he's the last living air nomad, Aang still has a deep love and connection to his culture. He clings to every bit of it that still exists, like Appa and Momo or the air temples. Even as the most powerful bender in the world, Aang rarely lets it go to his head. He remains humble for the majority of the series. On the off chance he is self-absorbed, he turns it around quickly, once someone else points out that he's being a jerk. Aang isn't perfect, and most of his flaws come from being too naive. He's also too compassionate, such as when he doesn't have the will to end Ozai's life, or not being able to let go of Katara to take control of the Avatar state. Speaking of which, he forgets about all his friends in that instance. Don't they matter too? Anyway, all that isn't surprising, coming from a 12-year-old who wakes up in a completely different world from the one he knows after being told he has to save it. And save it he does. With the entire Fire Nation, an exiled prince, and 3 deadly teenage girls on his back, Aang has to speedrun his way to mastering the 4 elements in less than a year, an unprecedented display of strength for even the Avatar. With the fate of the world resting on his shoulders, he pulls through and defeats Fire Lord Ozai on his own terms, with the help of his friends, of course. To me, there's no doubt that Aang is the purest character, as the world would certainly be doomed without him. Though I'm sure a few people want him to be number 1, we have to give second place to Uncle Iroh. Iroh's the best of Gandalf, Yoda, and Mr. Miyagi wrapped into one, combining wisdom with mastery to create the perfect mentor. Outside of wartime, he's the friendliest person one could run into. Who else would sit down and have a chat with some guy who tried to rob you at knife point?
A little help from others can be a great blessing.
He also has a way with the ladies, though they don't always buy his charm. He has nothing but respect for Team Avatar from as early as the first season. This is seen when he helps them protect the Moon Spirit and rarely assists in trying to capture them. Though he cares a lot about the Fire Nation, Iroh's investment is purely in Zuko, as he tries to help his nephew leave behind his anger and take the path of virtue. As someone who lost his own son, it's no wonder why Iroh takes it upon himself to become a father figure to Zuko, who never truly had one. Iroh provides everything from bits of wisdom to combat support. Even after Zuko falters and betrays his uncle, Iroh still loves him and forgives him. As you probably guessed, his time as a general is the only thing holding him back. I won't fault him for doing what he was raised to do by his royal parents, but he caused immense damage to the Earth Kingdom in his earlier years. Thankfully, he gets a chance to redeem himself when Sozin's comet arrives. He leads the White Lotus to the liberation of Ba Sing Se, standing up to Admiral Zhao at the North Pole and taking on the Dai Li to help Team Avatar escape are great displays of heroism as well. Iroh makes up for his past mistakes and becomes a guide to the one who needs him the most, his nephew. He's a true role model, and I think everyone needs an Uncle Iroh in their life. Just don't serve him bad tea, or you might catch some fire breath. This might be a surprise, but we're gonna place Appa and Momo at 3rd. Normally, animals with little to no concept of morality wouldn't count. However, these two are smart enough to at least know who the good guys are. Appa is important to the story, as he is Team Avatar's main mode of transportation. When necessary, he's also a decent fighter, like when he plows through the Dai Li Forest after escaping Lake Laogai. Momo can't do as much, but there are several scenes where he helps out, such as when he saves Aang from falling off the drill.
Thanks, Momo. I owe you one.
They're also capable of forming legitimate friendships with people and each other. In fact, Momo even daydreams and tries to look for Appa during the Tales of Ba Sing Se in a heartbreaking scene. It's no secret that the gang wouldn't have gotten far without Appa. As for Momo, well, we're including him too, so we don't have to make a whole separate entry for him. Either way, these two are essential parts of Team Avatar, who certainly deserve more credit than they get. Next is another dual entry. We have Kaya and Hakoda of the Water Tribe. They are the leaders of the Southern Water Tribe, as well as the parents of Sokka and Katara. Unfortunately, their children had to do a lot of growing up without them for the past several years. Kaya is only seen one time during a flashback episode, in which she pleads with the leader of the invading Fire Nation force to take her captive to spare Katara. Nonetheless, the captain takes the opportunity to kill who he thinks is the last of the Southern Waterbenders. Even though she's only in a single episode, sacrificing her life for her children is top-tier heroism. As for Chief Hakoda, he makes the painstaking decision to leave his children and his tribe to lead the war effort. After spending 3 long years fighting, he meets his children once again. However, the reunion is overshadowed by the devastating loss of the Earth Kingdom. Not long after, though, he and the others begin planning a small invasion force. We also get to see his fatherly side, as he reconciles with Katara for leaving her and Sokka as children. On the day of Black Sun, he shows his courage, determination, and heroism as he leads his force from the front line to the battle. That is until he's nearly blown up. But luckily, Sokka has everything he needs to carry on in his father's place. Unfortunately, the plan falls through, and Hakoda decides to surrender with the rest of the adults to allow the younger fighters to escape. After Sokka breaks him and others out of prison, Hakoda has one last moment of triumph after helping to take out the infamous Warden of the Boiling Rock and finally returning to his family for real this time. These two parents collectively have a massive list of heroic deeds. If nothing else, their parenting shows through the awesome children that they've raised.
I am the proudest father in the world.
Next is the last Southern Waterbender, Katara. Katara is understandably dissatisfied with her life in the Water Tribe. All the men, including her father, are off to fight in a war from which they might not return. She has no one to train with or relate to as a waterbender. She's left to do most of the work, while Sokka pretends to be more useful than he actually is. This immediately changes when she digs the long-lost Avatar out of his icy shell. She and her brother embark on an epic adventure to save the world with him. Katara is the empathetic, hopeful spark that holds the team together through the toughest of times. This is most demonstrated when our heroes are demoralized and stranded in the desert without Appa.
Come on, guys. We've got to stick together.
This can lead the gang into trouble, though, such as when she risked the invasion plan to help some random villagers. Personally, I think her actions in that episode were selfish and almost got many people hurt or killed, possibly due to the loss of her mother. Katara also acts as the team's caretaker. However, she can often seem overbearing, and this causes tension between her and Toph. Even if she gets bossy, it's always from a place of love and affection. As for combat, she is an adept waterbending master. Her most standout moments don't come until over halfway through the series, such as fighting hordes of Dai Li agents, learning to bloodbend, and defeating Azula. What I consider her darkest episode, she travels with Zuko to confront the man who killed her mother, almost entirely consumed by vengeance. Thankfully, she does not give in to anger when she meets him. Still, she also completely disregards Aang and Sokka, as if they couldn't possibly know what it's like to lose someone to the Fire Nation. Seriously, she says this to the last Airbender. The good definitely outweighs the bad, cementing her high-tier spot with the good characters. Just below his sister is going to be Sokka. Would you believe that the comic relief actually has one of the strongest and most fleshed out arcs in the entire series? There are too many facets to his character development to cover in this video. We can still discuss some of the highlights, such as his willingness to learn and progress as a warrior. From the very beginning, Sokka is fearless in the face of danger, as well as overconfident and foolhardy. It's no surprise that he gets his butt kicked multiple times by better fighters. His future girlfriend, Suki, probably hands him his worst defeat. after which he humbles himself so that she will teach him how to properly fight. He also drops the sexism and becomes a more well-rounded and skilled warrior. This journey culminates in Book 3 when he meets Piandao and impresses the Swordmaster with his creativity and bright personality. He eventually mastered his weapon in preparation for the final battles. Though he feels like he's just the guy in the group who's regular compared to the others, he proves that he has a lot to offer in terms of wisdom on and off the battlefield.
Fire Lord Ozai, here we come.
Sokka is also protective of those he loves, from his sister to his friends to his love interest. While Aang is technically the leader of the team, Sokka usually plans out most of their moves and decides the best course of action for most situations. In that regard, he outclasses Aang in terms of war strategy. Besides, you probably wouldn't look for a peace-loving monk for battle advice anyway. His importance in the story cannot be stressed enough. While he may start off as the most flawed of the original members, Sokka grows into a strong, wise, and humble leader with a great sense of humor to boot. Next is Monk Gyatso. Outside of Aang, he receives the most attention and characterization of all the air nomads. He cares for Aang more than anything else. Although Aang is a victim of circumstance, Gyatso keeps his student in good spirits, despite the looming threat of war and the premature reveal that Aang is the Avatar. Unfortunately, the other monks see Gyatso's treatment of him as neglecting his responsibilities.
As long as I am his guardian, I will decide when he trains.
For that, they separate the two of them. Gyatso even plans to go against their decision, but Aang runs away before his master can reach him. Whatever the case may be, it's clear that Gyatso tries to do what he thinks is best for Aang, and that leaves an impact of his ranking on this list. Next up is Princess Yue. Yue is the princess of the Northern Water Tribe who was saved by the Moon Spirit at birth. Team Avatar encounters her once they reach the North Pole, and Sokka takes special interest in her. Unfortunately, before they really have a chance to get to know each other, the Fire Nation attacks, like it always does. Sokka is tasked by the chief to protect Yue during the battle, while she stays near the Spirit Oasis. After Zhao slays the Moon Spirit, Yue returns the life given to her back to the moon and assumes the role of the Moon Spirit herself. It's unclear how much Yue as the Moon Spirit helps Team Avatar in their average everyday fights. Still, she saves Aang's life at least once, when she appears to him during the opening of Book 3. We like to give lots of credit to those who sacrifice their lives for a greater cause, which certainly applies here. It seems Yue will be living on to watch over the world for a long time. Now it's time to talk about the blind bandit, Toph Beifong. Toph was raised as an upper-class high society girl who received more sheltering than usual because of her blindness. Tired of her overbearing parents cutting her off from the outside world, Toph runs away to help train the Avatar to fight against the Fire Nation. In contrast to Katara, Toph is brash, stubborn, and independent. This leads to a few conflicts between the two, which brings out the worst in both. All of her personality flaws are secondary issues. She's proven on several occasions that she can be compassionate and encouraging when she needs to be. Though she deliberately tries to distance herself from her upper-class origins, her background comes in handy when the team needs to blend into a high society party in Ba Sing Se. Where Toph shines the most is on the battlefield as an absolute powerhouse of an airbender. She uses her prowess to save the team a few times, such as when crossing the Serpent's Pass. However, she also has to make the impossible decision to let the Sandbenders capture Appa to prevent the Spirit Library from sinking with their friends inside. Toph also steamrolls through herds of enemies on the ground, and even in the sky, once she discovers metal bending. Ultimately, Toph is stubborn but level-headed, and definitely has a soft spot for the other members of her team. Her achievements on the battlefield speak for themselves.
That's how it's done.
Moving on, we have the leader of the Kyoshi warriors, Suki. As their leader, her first duty is to protect Kyoshi Island from all outside threats and to train new warriors. Suki's first interaction with Team Avatar isn't too friendly, made worse by Sokka's inability to accept that he got beaten by a girl.
Anything else you want to teach us?
But she eventually forgives him after humbling him. She teaches him how to become a better warrior with proper technique instead of brute strength. She later fights valiantly against Zuko's attack force. During Book 2, she accompanies Team Avatar to the Serpent's Pass, and she saves Toph's life. She also takes care of Appa when she and the other warriors find him lost and injured, and sends him away when Azula attacks. She finally joins the team during Book 3 after being rescued from the boiling rock. She helps immensely in taking down the airships during the finale. In a way, Suki is underrated, so we hope to give her the credit she deserves with a high spot on our list. Guru Patik is next. Like Gyatso, Patik is a nomadic spiritual teacher, and the two of them were even friends, which gives us an idea of this man's age. Although he did not have allegiance to their nation, their shared spirituality likely drew him closer to the air nomads. He can connect with Aang and even Appa on an ethereal level. He attempts to help Aang unlock all of his chakras and gain mastery over the Avatar state.
You must accept that you are the Avatar.
However, Aang cannot let go of his earthly attachments and pulls a Luke Skywalker, running off to battle before his training is complete. That's not really on the Guru, but his teachings were valuable to Aang, even if he couldn't use them properly at first. Without Patik, Aang may not have stood a chance in his final showdown. Next is King Bumi. Bumi is a strange fellow. It's hard to tell if his craziness is an act or if he's legitimately a few plums short of a fruit pie.
What do you think of my new outfit? I want your honest opinion.
For one thing, he spends an entire episode tricking Aang into thinking his friends are gonna die unless he completes all the king's trials. But to be fair, deciding to play a prank on a friend he hasn't seen in 100 years and yet recognized immediately could also show how friendly he is. Though he's known as a crazy monarch, there's never anything to imply that he's a tyrant or even incompetent. After surrendering to the Fire Nation, he breaks himself free of captivity. He takes the city of Omashu back single-handedly, saving the lives of his soldiers and sparing them a long war for the kingdom. He's also one of the Old Masters, a division of the Order of the White Lotus dedicated to keeping the balance of the world, and he participates in the liberation of Ba Sing Se. He doesn't appear often, but at least we know he's been on the side of good for longer than the 100-Year War. Next is the Old Masters, including Piandao, Pakku, and Zhang, in that order. Each of these men has a run-in with the Avatar, and two of them act as his elemental teachers, though Pakku has more success than Zhang in that regard. The order of this ranking is mostly determined by personality traits rather than actions. The Swordmaster Piandao is ranked highest because he's the wisest, most patient, and most encouraging teacher. We see this in his training with Sokka, even with the fake-out trying to kill him part of the lesson.
You will become an even greater master than I am.
Master Pakku's morality is more complicated. He follows the Northern Water Tribe's traditions and refuses to train women in combat. Luckily, Katara changes his mind with her natural skills, and she becomes the greatest master he's ever trained. Zhang is one of the most unique characters in the series. Not only did he desert the Fire Nation as an admiral, but he also hates his bending ability and views it as a curse. As such, he has no interest in teaching Aang how to firebend, nor does he believe Aang has the discipline to master the element. After Roku coerces him into it, Zhang reluctantly tries to teach the young and impatient Avatar. His fears are realized when Aang cannot control the fire he makes, burning Katara in the process. Even with his short temper and uncompromising teaching style, none of that lands Zhang behind the other two. Compared to Iroh, Zhang's decades in the Fire Navy holds him back more than anything. It's very likely that he contributed to the Fire Nation's conquest and led to mass destruction throughout the nations. However, it's also possible that this contributed to his hatred of the element of fire, his self-isolation, and his intent to rectify his past mistakes with the Order of the White Lotus. Significant characters in the grand scheme of things who definitely deserve a spot in the good tier. Next is Aang's predecessor, Avatar Roku. This placement seems low for a man who served his duty as Avatar for decades and helped to mentor Aang into a worthy successor. For that, we can certainly start with his good actions. Roku is a perfect example of someone with unwavering determination, as we can see from his years spent mastering the elements. Despite his long and difficult journey, Roku returns home with the same optimism, enthusiasm, and kindness he had when he left. It's not really what Roku has done that lands him this low, but it's more about what he didn't do. Obviously, the Avatar can't just go around assassinating a world leader in his throne room. Still, he probably could have done more to warn the other nations that Sozin was planning to take over the world. However, he does everything he can to redeem himself by preparing Aang to bring down the Fire Lord and end the 100-Year War. And I just know that people would riot if we didn't include Avatar Kyoshi. Most of what we know about her is told through dialogue and backstory. However, she makes one public appearance when Aang is put on trial for an alleged crime that she committed, which she confesses to. That isn't helpful to Aang, but at least we can't call her a liar. However, saving the Earth Kingdom from Shin the Conqueror and creating a new island for her people to live in peace is heroic. If we were referencing the comic books, I'd dock her a hell of a lot of points for creating the Dai Li, but we aren't, so she lucks out on that front and remains with the good characters. Let's briefly mention the Swamp Benders. When Team Avatar is sucked into the swamp, the local inhabitants give our heroes trouble. Half of them try to kidnap and eat Appa and Momo. At the same time, another one poses as a giant vine monster and starts a massive fight with Aang, Katara, and Sokka. However, Hugh, the vine bender, believed he was defending his home and imparts some spiritual wisdom to Aang when the fighting ceases. As for the other ones, they stop hunting the animals once everything is explained. They even let Team Avatar camp with them for the night. They also show up to help invade the Fire Nation on the Day of Black Sun, which is a big commitment for people who only met the Avatar once. For that, we gotta give them a spot in the good tier. Closing off the good characters are Ursa, Zuko, and Azula's mother. Although we won't be referencing her fate in the comments, rest assured that there is much more to her story. As for the series, Ursa is painted as a loving and caring mother to Zuko, while her relationship with Azula is more complicated. I'm more willing to pin that on Ozai's manipulation than Ursa's parenting. You may be wondering why she's so low on the list, and it mostly has to do with her plan to spare Zuko's life from the wrath of Fire Lord Azulan. Now, if this plan involved murdering anyone other than the Fire Lord, I might have something else to say. Since it was not only in self-defense of her son, but also involved killing a dictator, I'll give it a pass. What I can't ignore is that she's responsible for putting Ozai on the throne. Although we don't know if Iroh would have been a fair ruler at that point, he would have been better than a genocidal maniac. However, since Zuko stays alive, he's able to play an instrumental role in his father's downfall.
Everything I've done to protect you.
Obviously, I don't think she planned any of this out from the beginning. She simply did it to save her son's life, which anyone else would do. For that reason, she barely escapes the gray area. That's it for the good characters. Now it's time to talk about the characters who are a bit more questionable than the others. This is the gray area. Next, we have everyone's favorite Cabbage Man. He doesn't want much more in life than to roam the Earth Kingdom and provide a healthy commodity for the people. Although the quality of his product might not be up to par, calling for the gang's execution was a little much.
Off with their heads! One for each head of cabbage!
To be fair, most people would be upset if 3 teenagers routinely destroyed their only way to make a living. In the end, wherever there's trouble, there will be an unfortunately placed cabbage cart just waiting to be demolished. Now it's time to talk about the so-called freedom fighter, Jet. He's introduced as the leader of a band of kids who live in tree houses and run raids against the Fire Nation. However, some of his methods are questionable. When he first meets Team Avatar, Aang and Katara are quickly drawn in by Jet. Meanwhile, Sokka has a bad feeling about him, which may or may not spawn from jealousy. After joining them on a mission in which the freedom fighters assault a harmless old man, Sokka tries to expose Jet. Katara and Aang brush off his accusations and continue working with the freedom fighters. Shortly after, Jet's plan to eradicate all Fire Nation forces in the area is revealed. He intends to flood a nearby dam and then blow it up, wiping out the town and everyone. Sokka warns the townfolk in time, though the dam is still detonated anyway. Jet comes close to killing hundreds of people in one episode, all because he's completely consumed by vengeance. In all fairness, we know from his backstory that he has legitimate reason for his hatred of firebenders. His parents were killed and his village destroyed by the Rough Rhinos. He also has a short-lived alliance with Zuko and Iroh, which quickly crumbles once Jet starts speculating that they're firebenders. Although he's correct, Jet uses underhanded tactics to have them arrested when they never did anything to him. After being captured and brainwashed, Jet runs into Team Avatar once again, now as a puppet of the Dai Li. He doesn't intend to hurt them, but he is being used to distract them and throw them off Appa's trail. All this buildup is starting to sound like Jet actually belongs in the bad territory. Still, I have to give credit where credit is due and say that Jet actually does some good things in his final appearance. First, he leads Team Avatar to Lake Laogai. Second, after succumbing to the mind control and attacking Aang, he breaks free of the Dai Li's grip. He's fatally wounded while attacking Long Fang. You've probably noticed that sacrificing one's own life earns a character credit in terms of their morality. This is the reason he's not lower for his previous actions. Next, we have Ty Lee. Although some might argue she should be placed even higher because of her demeanor, this is still about as not bad as a recurring villain gets. She grew up best friends with Mai and Azula. Still, unlike those two, she has no interest in fighting and prefers circus performing instead. However, once Azula is tasked with finding the Avatar, she recruits her childhood friends once again. and Ty Lee is forced into battle. She doesn't seem to have any malicious intent or even loyalty to the Fire Nation, but she fights with enthusiasm. Ty Lee is practically the only villain who doesn't use lethal means to defeat her enemies, preferring to incapacitate them with chi blocking techniques. Although it's clear she values her friendship with Azula, she definitely pushes Ty Lee far past her limit, to the point where she's willing to betray the Fire Princess at the Boiling Rock. She later jumps ship to the Kyoshi Warriors. And the other member of Ozai's Angels, Mei, is next. Mei is a moody goth teenager who hardly does anything but complain about how bored she is. She views her new assignment as Azula's lackey as an opportunity to get away from her dull, uninteresting life as a governor's daughter. While she isn't exactly enthusiastic about fighting, she's willing to carry out her orders. Most of the time, anyway.
Just take the bear.
There's also a detail which some viewers might have overlooked. Mei willingly calls off the prisoner exchange of King Bumi and her own baby brother, putting the infant at risk and showing no care for him at all. That may or may not have been a bluff, but it's morally corrupt. The only time she shows some amount of emotion is when she's around her boyfriend, Zuko. Even then, she still loves to find things to complain about, and the two of them fight a lot. Regardless, I will give her props for staying loyal to him for 2 years and being there for him once he returns from exile. Aside from spending almost an entire season chasing Team Avatar, Mei also nearly tries to have Zuko locked up in the Boiling Rock. After talking to him, she decides to oppose Azula alongside Ty Lee and help Zuko escape. That love sounds strong, but overall, Mei belongs solidly in the gray area. It at least matches her demeanor. Next is Prince Zuko. If this isn't one of the greatest arcs in cartoon history, I don't know what is. Zuko certainly takes a long time to complete his transition from an evil outcast to a heroic leader, but that's what makes his character development real and fulfilling. Now, in between that transition, there's certainly a lot to unpack. First, his intent to capture the Avatar to restore his honor makes sense for his character, but that would inevitably result in the Fire Lord winning the war even if they'd have to deal with another Avatar later. Zuko repeatedly invades and terrorizes innocent villages in his search for Aang, and leaves a trail of destruction in his wake.
This staff will make an excellent gift for my father.
There's also the fact that he hires Combustion Man to hunt down and kill the Avatar, even after his supposed death in Ba Sing Se. But personally, I think his most dubious act is his treatment of his uncle Iroh throughout most of the series. Iroh leaves the Fire Nation to embark on this journey with him, acts as his firebending teacher, and saves his life on several occasions. Despite all of that, Zuko rarely heeds Iroh's advice and even betrays him a couple of times in favor of his own selfish goals. To be completely fair, it isn't as though Zuko doesn't care for his uncle. In fact, there are a few times when he goes out of his way to save Iroh, such as when he rescues him from Earthbenders during the winter solstice. It's safe to say that Iroh is one of the sole determining factors in Zuko finding his way to Team Avatar as a hero. I still believe Zuko, at his core, wants to do the right thing. We can see examples of this all the way back in Season 1, such as when he stops tracking the Avatar for the safety of his crew during the storm. We should also acknowledge Zuko's upbringing as the son of an evil tyrant for whom Zuko will eventually be expected to take over. Combined with his mother's banishment, it clearly had an impact on his outlook for the future of his life. Zuko's story may have had a very dark beginning, but he transforms from a misguided loner into a hero destined to bring peace to the Fire Nation. We can honestly talk about his story for hours, but you already knew Zuko being in the gray area was a given, so let's move on. Closing off the gray area is going to be Wan Shi Tong, he who knows 10,000 things. This giant owl spirit runs his very own lost spirit library in the middle of the desert, but he doesn't take kindly to humans trotting around inside. Not anymore, at least. He would rather keep all the knowledge to himself, and he's clearly prejudiced against all humans, which is unfair. I can understand valuing a vast array of knowledge such as this, but Wan Shi Tong fails to understand the context of the Fire Nation. They would likely destroy the library if they found it, trying to conquer the entire world. He also tries to bury our heroes forever. His actions indirectly lead to Appa being captured and Team Avatar being stranded in the desert. There really isn't a whole lot to say, other than that he's a massive jerk, but it's sort of understandable. I'm letting him off the hook by keeping him out of the bad territory. That concludes the gray area. Now it's time to descend into madness as we talk about the bad and the evil characters. The pirates have the honor of being the first bad guys featured on the list. They're exactly how you'd think they'd be, spending their days traveling the high seas and picking up loot. Oddly enough, they're able to sell their stolen goods out on the open market with hardly any discretion. I guess it's difficult to enforce maritime law when your navy is all fighting a war, but if you thought their villainy ended with theft, you'd be sorely mistaken. They also double as assassins, shown when they blow up Zuko's entire ship with him inside. They're run-of-the-mill pirate characters who will do anything for the right price. So let's get on to the next entry. Up next is one of the creepiest villains in the whole series, Hama. She finds Team Avatar during the dead of night, camping in the middle of the forest. Not creepy at all. She's one of the last remnants of benders from the Southern Water Tribe. She develops a kinship with Katara, who can certainly relate. After she teaches Katara a few tricks, Hama introduces her to the ultimate water-bending sub-skill, blood-bending. At this point, Hama admits that she's been using this technique to kidnap innocent villagers to keep them locked under a mountain for something. It's never stated, but I assume torture. She does this as an act of vengeance against the Fire Nation who raided her village. They captured all the benders and then imprisoned her for life until she used blood-bending to escape. Finally, she engages in one last battle. She almost kills Aang and Sokka until Katara uses Hama's own technique against her and ends the fighting. Hama may be slightly more sympathetic than the others, but there's still no doubt in my mind that she belongs with the villains. Next is a man of the fewest possible words, Combustion Man. Since Zuko is suspicious that Azula didn't get the job done at Ba Sing Se, he sends out a professional to hunt down and kill the Avatar for good. The assassin comes in the form of this guy. As one of the most unique villains in the series, he tracks Team Avatar all over the Fire Nation, and even traps Katara and Toph to lure out Aang on one occasion. It shows how resourceful he is. Because he never talks, we have to infer and judge most of his motivation based on his actions. I suppose it's respectable that he always has his mind on the job, even after his employer tries to call it off. When the job involves taking out the only hope left to restore balance to the world, I question whether or not he's that cruel. I guess sometimes it's not about the money, it's about sending a message. Either way, he gets taken out by a precision boomerang strike, but not before destroying a hell of a lot of landscape while trying to kill Aang. We're gonna give a quick mention to Yan Ra. Considering he's only in one episode, it might come as a shock that he's even being included. Not only are his actions important to the story, but he's also a vile character. He was once the Southern Raiders leader who's responsible for eradicating the population of Southern waterbenders. It culminated when he invaded the village and killed Katara's mother, who he believed to be the last of them.
I'm afraid I'm not taking prisoners today.
In the present day, he's been reduced to a pathetic old man living with his mother, and no fame, glory, or money to his name. Katara wouldn't have been entirely wrong to take revenge against him, but perhaps it's better to leave him cowering in the street all alone. He's listed here because he's another example of the Fire Nation's cruelty with genocidal tendencies. Like we didn't already have enough of those. Moving on, we have one of the only evil spirits, Ko the Face Stealer. He's another character with only one major appearance. He isn't even a true villain, but the implications of his actions can't be ignored. Of course, you can probably guess most of his evil deeds just by his name. Anyone who encounters him and shows any sort of emotion gets their face stolen. Men, women, children, and even animals have fallen victim to Ko's trap. However, I will grant that while he inflicts lots of suffering on the physical world, he also respects other spirits. He helps Aang find the moon and ocean spirits to protect them from Zhao. But considering that this dude has been stealing faces for many millennia, that's about as much leeway as I'm going to give him. I'm also willing to bet he terrified all of us as kids, so he can remain firmly in the bad territory. Starting the top 5 is Ba Sing Se's evil mastermind, Long Feng. It's hinted early on that the Dai Li have much more going on than they want their citizens to realize, which is to be expected from a secret police force. Team Avatar then decides to take matters into their own hands and break away from their state-appointed handlers. However, Long Feng steps in to halt their progress in informing the Earth King of the 100-Year War by threatening them with expulsion from the city. He also kidnaps Appa to use him as leverage if Team Avatar steps too far out of line. Certainly, the worst of his offenses is seizing practically all government power of Ba Sing Se from within. He strips the Earth King of his duties and uses totalitarian methods to suppress political dissent. This can include deception, censorship, unjust imprisonment, and brainwashing from which nobody's safe. Long Feng also kills Jet after he breaks free of his mind control and attacks the Dai Li chief. Even after Team Avatar turns the Earth King against him, he still would have had the upper hand if not for attempting to work with Fire Nation agents to recapture the city. For decades, Longfeng was essentially a dictator from the shadows. Now, he's finally dispatched by the next entry on our list. Barely missing out in the top 3 is Princess Azula. If psychological manipulation was an Olympic event, Azula would take home the gold every year. It seems as though she doesn't know any other ways to connect with people besides preying on their deepest, darkest fears. Even her closest friends only go along with her because they're afraid of what she might do to them if they refuse. As the main antagonist for Book 2, she spends most of her time hunting Team Avatar throughout the Earth Kingdom and conquering territory along the way. By the end of the season, she deceives her way into the Earth King's court, manipulates the Dai Li into betraying Long Feng, and effectively conquers Ba Sing Se from the inside out. She even mortally wounds Aang when he's in the Avatar state. She would have broken the Avatar cycle and resulted in Ozai's world domination if not for Katara bringing Aang back to life. With all these horrific acts, it might come as a surprise that Azula isn't ranked even higher. As one might assume, this placement is mostly a result of her upbringing. Receiving less attention from her mother than Zuko sucks, but that doesn't gain much sympathy for me, given all her evil actions. What I think earns her some forgiveness is that she was Ozai's favorite and spent much more time around him. During that time, he likely indoctrinated her with his power-hungry, bloodthirsty ideals. It could be that he trained her to become a cold-blooded killer, and that's probably the best descriptor of her. Yeah, there are a few moments where we see a legitimate human side to her, such as when she's on vacation with her friends on Ember Island. I mean, they're so infrequent that they really don't make a difference when judging her personality.
My own mother thought I was a monster.
However, it is hard not to pity her when she realizes she's been defeated and finally collapses into a mental breakdown. She is still just a teenager, after all. In third place is going to be Admiral Zhao. Zhao is probably the most one-note and least interesting among the main villains, but he's still a cruel bastard. As a student of Zhong, he proved to be powerful but unable or unwilling to control his own bending. He doesn't care about collateral damage during his fights. He's also one of the main reasons Wan Shi Tong is biased against humans, considering that Zhao was the last person before Team Avatar to visit the library, and he burned down a large portion of it. As for the war effort, we can assume, given his rank, that he's led many raids and invasions off-screen and racked up a high death toll. The one target he can't kill, Aang, Zhao has imprisoned and threatens to torture him within an inch of his life.
How does it feel to be the only airbender left?
Thankfully, this plan is thwarted by the mysterious blue spirit. Speaking of which, Zhao spends most of Book 1 in open competition with Zuko. He even attempts to have Zuko assassinated before the invasion of the North Pole, while hiding this fact from Iroh in an attempt to get the former general on his side. Without a doubt, his most dangerous and evil act is storming through the Northern Water Tribe, breaking into the Spirit Oasis, and slaying the Moon Spirit. If not for Aang, Iroh, and Princess Yue, Zhao would have certainly conquered the Water Tribe, but at the cost of the entire world being thrown out of balance forever. In terms of natural consequences, Zhao would have had the most disastrous effects on the world. Still, he's far outclassed in terms of his body count compared to our next contenders. The silver medal of evil is going to Fire Lord Ozai. What can we say about the big bad of the entire series? The man who's caused immense destruction across all nations from his throne room, and probably the worst father in animation history? It's not often we have a villain without a shred of humanity or any redeeming qualities whatsoever.
It's time for this world to end in fire.
Empathy seems to have been removed from his brain. He is a sociopath in all of his dealings. Ozai even left a mark on his own cruelty on his son, simply for speaking out of turn, causing the young prince to be consumed by rage and shame for the next 2 years in exile. He also tries to murder Zuko once he decides to defect from the Fire Nation. As for Azula, we've already been over his mistreatment of her and how he turned her into a monster of his own making. Ozai's father was a jerk too, but that only goes so far as an excuse when we're dealing with a man who wants to exterminate the Earth Kingdom's population. That goes far beyond bad parenting. Besides, Ozai participated in the assassination of his own father to usurp the throne, so it's not like he cared much for the guy anyway. Ozai may not have created the cult of personality which surrounds the Fire Lord, but he certainly uses his position as ruler to suppress the freedoms of his citizens and create an atmosphere of terror within the Fire Nation. To his credit, he came the closest to winning the 100-Year War out of any Fire Lord. But just like his predecessors, he's no match for a fully realized Avatar. He's just lucky that he had to go up against the one Avatar who didn't want to kill him. Instead, he has the special privilege of losing the only thing that brought him any joy, his firebending. Hossain deserves worse than rotting in that prison cell. It just goes to show how far Zuko has made it on his personal journey, without his father's shadow looming over him. Every part of me wants to give Hossain the top spot, but our next contender is just worse according to any objective metric. The gold medal of evil instead goes to Hossain's grandfather, Fire Lord Sozin. What's fascinating is that Sozin pretty much lacks most of the personality flaws that we see in other villains like Zhao and Hossain. He really isn't nearly as arrogant or self-absorbed as the others. He also hasn't been shown to manipulate people. Since we see his entire backstory, he's more humanized than other bad guys. But actions will always speak louder than words, and Sozin's body count is undoubtedly the highest in the series. Every evil plan that Hossain failed to execute, Sozin successfully implemented. From killing the Avatar to the genocide of an entire nation to harnessing the power of a comet to achieve his goals. All of these he committed under the guise of spreading the prosperity of the Fire Nation to all corners of the world. Yeah, I can think of a few other dictators from history who wanted to share their nation's ideals through military conquest. Although Sozin effectively wiped out the air nomads, he was left with a hunch that the Avatar escaped. He lived out the rest of his days searching in vain for the one nomad who got away. I suppose that's as good a punishment as we're gonna get for him, because a man like Sozin deserves no peace. Alright, that's the list. Let us know in the comments section who you think are the most good and evil characters, and tell us what we should cover next. Remember to hit that notification bell and binge our Good to Evil playlist, where we break down the morality of the characters in your favorite cartoons, shows, and movies. But most importantly, stay wicked.